So today we are starting Ha'ikar Ha'asiri, the 10th principle on page 203. Ani Maamin be'emunah shlema sha'abari yisbarach shemo yodea kol ma'aseh b'nei adam v'chol machshavo yisam shene'emar hayotzi yachad libam ha'mevin el kol ma'aseyem. I am steadfast in my absolute belief that the Creator, blessed is His name, knows all the deeds of human beings and all of their thoughts. So it's interesting, both their ma'asim, their deeds, and also their thoughts as well. Shene'emar, as it says, a pasuk in Tehillim, hayotzi yachad libam ha'mevin el kol ma'aseyem, who fashions their hearts together and understands all of their deeds. This is an easy one to remember because it is principle 10, Yud and Yodea. It's all about Hashem's knowledge, Hashem knowing. Okay, let's begin on page 207. Yodea kol ma'aseh b'nei adam v'chol machshavo yisam. Hashem is aware of and attentive to every single thing that we do. I might be alone in the privacy of my home, or I might be just one of a vast crowd. I might be involved in something truly life-altering, an act of epic consequence, or I might simply be carrying out a run-of-the-mill everyday action, boring and mundane. It makes no difference. Hashem is watching it all, everything I do and everything I think. Okay, so this is it. Yodea, Hashem knows about all of our actions. Now, at this stage, it sounds a little bit scary, right? You know, like Hashem is watching you. It sounds a bit like Big Brother and that type of thing. But we're going to see how actually it's a really positive thing. Let's have a look. This Ikar and the next are closely linked. In this Ikar, this principle, we highlight Hashem's omniscient awareness of and his focus on all of our thoughts and actions. In the next principle, we stress that every one of our actions, major or minor, has consequences. Some of these consequences are beneficial. There's sechar, there's reward if we do the right thing, while others are detrimental. There's onish and punishment if we're wrong. But every action creates a reaction. These two principles are bound together, as appropriating fair reward and retribution for our actions is possible only to the degree that the score is kept accurately. Hashem maintains a perfect tabulation both of our actions as well as of our internal thought processes. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says that this idea of Hashem being the only one who understands our actions is the reason why we cannot judge anyone else. Because we may think that we have seen something within someone else, but we have no idea what's going on in their thought processes as well. And we have no idea what the context is of that action. So therefore, we can't judge any other person. He says only Hashem, who is the one who knows not only the actions, but also the thought process and the context, and has no shichcha, there's no forgetting. Only Hashem is the one who can make that judgment about a person. And therefore, that's why it's important that these two principles go together. Number one, that Hashem is the one who knows and understands all of our actions and our thoughts. And then number two, Hashem is the one who gives that sachar, the reward when appropriate, and the onish and the punishment when appropriate as well. Those two things go together. Let's continue. The bottom page 207. The Torah repeatedly emphasizes the concept of reward or punishment for our actions. But on what basis are our thoughts evaluated? Right? Meaning very often in the Torah we speak about doing a mitzvah, performing a mitzvah, and performing an avera. What about our thoughts? We're told that Hashem generally does not give punishment for thoughts. This, however, likely refers to thoughts that remain in the domain of the mind. Meaning, if you have a person thinks or plots to do something wrong, but then he doesn't actually do it, the Gemara says that in that case, it is not considered as if he did the action. He doesn't get punished just for the thought. If the thought propels a person to act, then it can be considered part of the action and therefore punishable. This principle pertains to thoughts of committing a sinful act, such as eating veal parmesan, which does not sound pleasant to me, robbing a bank, or going harpoon fishing on Shabbos. A little bit random example there, right? So a person thinking about any of those acts won't be punished for doing it, as long as they don't follow through and they don't do it. Since the avera hasn't actually been performed, the thought can be set aside. However, there are other prohibitions that are transgressed by thought alone. Belief in idols, hatred of another Jew, or thoughts of immorality, for instance. Right? A fascinating thing, meaning that this idea that Hashem knows our thoughts means that there are some things where we are held accountable. There's no system of law in the world that will hold a person accountable to their thoughts. except in some sort of 1984, dystopian reality where they can read your mind. But there's no real system of law down here that can do that, including the Torah's system of law, which is run and administered by Beis Din. But Hashem, the Creator, who knows all of our thoughts as well, can command us that immoral thoughts are immoral. Hashem can command us that believing in idols or hating another Jew is forbidden, and we can be held accountable for those thoughts. Envying your neighbor's gleaming vehicle or well-manicured lawn would likely qualify as well, right? Not being jealous. Since the thoughts themselves constitute a fully fledged transgression, they warrant retribution. The person will be punished. On the other hand, mere thoughts of doing a mitzvah are rewarded. So although when one thinks about doing an aveira, they're not punished. But if one thinks and wants and intends and wishes to do a mitzvah, he's rewarded, even if the person ultimately could not perform the mitzvah due to circumstances beyond his control. It's a beautiful concept. A machshava ra, if a person thinks to do something bad, Hashem does not consider it like the action was done, was followed through. But a machshava tova, but a good thought, a good intention, Hashem considers it as if one followed through. And the reason is because we say that ultimately a person always wants to do the right thing. A person's neshama deep down never wants to sin, never wants to do anything wrong. And therefore the fact that the person intended to do something wrong doesn't mean that he ever was going to be able to follow through. And therefore what really happened was that he pulled through and he managed to, if you like, be himself again. Whereas the person who has the thought to do a good deed, that was a real thought. That was really something that was him. That was an emanation of what was going on inside of him. And therefore, that is something which he's rewarded for, because he was only prevented from following through matters outside of his control. This is a beautiful idea about the purity, essentially. The neshama that you gave us is tahor, is pure, and therefore that's why the good intentions, we say, you certainly would have followed through. It's no fault of your own. There is yet another dimension, he continues, to Hashem's knowing our every thoughts, meaning in addition to the fact that we said there are certain mitzvahs and averas that are dependent upon thoughts, there's another dimension. Many of our actions seem on the surface neutral or undefined. Watching a person exit his front door, we would not be able to label his departure positive or negative. After all, we have no idea where he's headed or what he intends to do. Similarly, when someone makes a comment before a crowd of people, his words can often be interpreted in more than one light. Was his comment intended to be harmful, or was it just an innocent remark? Was another person's charitable gift an act of selflessness and concern, or was it really just a ploy to gain honor and recognition, right? An interesting thing. And if we're real with ourselves, these are the type of questions we need to ask ourselves, where we need to say to ourselves, it's not just what does this look like on the outside and everyone else thinks this looks good. We have to say to ourselves, what am I doing it for? What's my intention? What am I really doing? By the way, the only way we can do that is if we're in touch with ourselves. The first thing you have to know, Rav Wolbe says, is da'as atzmacha. He says, firstly, know yourself. Be realistic. Try and connect to yourself and where you're up to. And then once you've done that, then you'll be able to start assessing why you're doing the things that you're doing, what your motivations are they pure or are they not pure? Unfortunately, all too often, people have never even thought about themselves, and they've never even connected to the fact that there is this underlying motivation, or there is this part of me that is pulling me in certain directions. And therefore, unfortunately, that person will always be doing things in an external way, unaware of the internal desires and motivations and thought processes that are going on. But really, if we're in touch with ourselves, then we can realize that sometimes even an act which ostensibly could be a good act, but maybe our motivations aren't so good. And sometimes it can be the opposite as well. An act which isn't normally something that is the best thing to do, but maybe I'm motivated for doing it in a very, very good light. I was speaking to someone today about yesterday I was learning something about tefillah, and we were speaking about how, there's this innate sort of search that people have for something greater. People have a search for something which transcends the mundane and the regular and the daily grind of life and that sort of thing. And then the question is what people do with that. If people then take that and they actually do something which is transcendent, and they do something which connects to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, connects to Hashem, connects to something which is real. Or maybe they'll take it and they'll find meaning within their favorite football team, or they'll find meaning within their rock climbing hobby or something else. Now, both of those are coming from a good place, right? That person is searching. They're searching for something more than the mundane. And it's important that we are able to see where it's coming from. Rather than just dismiss it out of hand, we can say, okay, so that person is a searcher. That person is someone who's seeking something more. This is what they found at the moment, but maybe it could be that their eyes could be opened, that there's something actually more profound, and there's something which is more meaningful in life than that thing, but they are searching. So therefore, our thoughts are very important, that Hashem understands our actions through those thoughts. He understands our intent and our motivation. He continues, the only way to properly assess an action is to identify the thought process behind it. Knowing our thoughts is therefore critical to evaluating our actions. That seems to be the emphasis of this Ani Maamin, of this Ikar, this principle. As proof that Hashem is aware of all of our thoughts, the author of the Ani Maamin cites a verse that describes Hashem as knowing all the actions of mankind. Hamavin el kol ma'aseihem. Now, by the way, it's interesting. It's always fascinated me. This is the only principle that brings a pasuk. Right? So when you have your list of Ani Maamins, I'm sure you've still got your card here. When you have your list of Ani Maamins, the only one that actually brings a proof from a pasuk is Ikar number 10, principle number 10. Shenema hayotzi yachad libam hamavin el kol ma'aseim. That's interesting. He continues on page 209. Perhaps the operative phrase here is el kol, which literally means towards all of their actions. So Hamavin, the one who understands, El Kol Ma'aseh means to all their actions. It should have said Hamavin Kol Ma'aseh, who understands their actions. So what does it mean to all their actions? Not only is Hashem aware of the actions themselves, he also knows towards where the action is headed, which thought process spawned it. Beautiful idea. That's what it means. Once he's Yotze Yachad Libam, once the creator who understands our hearts, then he's Mavin El Kol Ma'aseim. He understands where your action is headed. Is this the beginning of an upward trajectory? Or is this just a blip and you're really on your way downwards? Is this something which shows that you've turned a corner? Or is this just something which is you've been doing your whole life and you're just carrying on and you're doing it by rote? Only the creator of the world is able to actually assess and to be able to understand those actions and where they're headed. What direction is a person going in? Let's continue. Ultimately, his awareness of everything we do allows us to receive precisely what we deserve. By keeping an exact score, Hashem can grant us our due compensation. The schar and onish detailed in the next principle, and yet this principle and the next are divided into two distinct statements. Clearly then, intertwined as they might be, each one must be conveying a unique, independent message, right? Do we see that? Because if they're two separate principles, then there must be something which is fundamental about this one all by itself, meaning even if there was no reward and punishment that existed, even if Hashem was not going to compensate us for our actions, the very fact that he is aware and knows what I'm doing and what I'm thinking, that itself has to be something which is a principle of our belief in Judaism. So what does that mean? If we separate the reward and punishment element from this principle, what are we left with? Aside from consequences, what significance lies in the knowledge that he is aware of what we do and think? The answer must be that this principle is stressing the very fact that he is watching us. Suppose you walk into a daycare center and begin to observe the toddlers in the rooms. You walk into a gun, to a nursery, and you're watching the toddlers. Some are busy building block towers while others are dressing dolls or engaged in various art projects. You sit down on the floor and watch one of these children in action. Mum, this sounds like your job. A block here, another block there. The tower of blocks goes up, the tower comes crashing down again. How interesting do you find this? Again, unless you're there, you're employed as a psychologist. How long can you watch this without getting fidgety? 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. Right? After a while, then it's a little bit boring. The gap between small children and adults is infinitely smaller than the gap between ourselves and Hashem. Yet, Hashem is watching us every moment of our lives, and he takes a keen interest in everything that we do. Meaning, although the distance between Hashem and us is far greater than the difference between the adult and the child who's being watched in the nursery. But nevertheless, Hashem watches every single aspect and moment of our life. This is something incredible. We're the subjects of Hashem's attention is something incredible. Rightly understood, this recognition compels us to attach far greater importance to every detail of our lives. I am someone he wants to watch. My actions matter to him. He considers my thoughts significant. If I was to end off, by the way, when I go and pick up Akiva from Gun, who's all of 18 months old, and I don't do it so often, but when I go pick him up from the Gun, and I just try to sort of watch him before he sees me. Once he sees you, then he's kind of like back in, the parent zone. And it's actually the cutest thing and so interesting as a parent to see what he's doing in Gun by himself. How is he interacting with other kids? Is he building towers yet? Is he playing with the water? Is he playing with the sand? How does he interact with the gun in it? And so when I read this, I thought to myself, yeah, it's true. If an adult randomly sits there watching someone else's child, then after 5 or 10 minutes, they get bored. But if you're watching your own son, you don't get bored. You're fascinated. You want to see all the details. You want to see more. And every moment is a joy. It's a pleasure to watch. It's the same thing with us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's not watching some random people. Hashem is watching his children. Hashem's looking down at us, every single members of Am Yisrael. And he's getting nachas. And yes, we're in the nursery sometimes. And sometimes we're a little bit childish. And sometimes he's probably wondering to himself, I'm sure they've made the mistake umpteen times before, and I'm just watching this play itself out again. And I'm sure that this bad midah, this character trait is something they've meant to work on for years, and they told me on Rosh Hashanah they were going to, yet they're still doing this wrong again. But you know what? When it's your parent, then your parent still loves you, and your parent still watches you. Build the same towers, smash them down, build the tower, smash it down, etc., etc. So that knowledge is what this ikar is all about. That principle is what this is all about. We're not a nothing. We're not just some accident of, evolution that happened to turn up in this world and as insignificant as any other ant that's crawling around, or even worse, plants or fungi that happen to exist. We're Hashem's children. And Hashem watches every single one of our actions that we're doing. Not only that, he investigates and thinks about our thoughts. How empowering is that as a human being to say that my actions matter? If they matter to the creator of the world, then we need to ask ourselves, do they matter to me as well? We're going to end there. Please God continue next week.